on the days when you're not motivated, what do you do? How do you show up? Do you show up at all? And what makes the professional is that when they are not motivated, they still show up and deliver at such a level that you would not know that they were not motivated that day because their performance is consistent across the board.
Hey everyone, before we get into this week's podcast, we got a pretty cool announcement to make. You are now able to connect with us. We have a pretty cool little widget that's on the website. Just go to paultaylor.biz/podcast. And near the top of the page, you'll see a little icon that says send a message to the Paul Taylor podcast. So what we can do with that, you just click on that and then you send us an audio message and we will get the audio message. Now, the first thing I want to do with using it is actually do an Ask Me Anything episode. So all you got to do if you got a question that you want me to cover is just go to paultaylor.biz/podcast, hit on start the recording, and then send us a message about what you would like me to talk about in the Ask Me Anything and leave your name. We will call it out on the show. I'll get that all put together. And the other thing you can do is just leave us a message about what you like about the podcast, what you don't like about the podcast. Did I talk too much? All of that sort of stuff. And just give us some feedback. And we will use that to continuously improve. So looking forward to hearing from you. Now, on with the podcast.
Dre Baldwin, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Paul, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Whereabouts do we find you?
Miami, Florida.
Oh, geez. What's it like there now?
Oh, beautiful. Always beautiful. I mean, you get the rainy season and get a couple storm scares, maybe one or two every year, but
couple of big ones lately, eh?
Yeah, but most of the time, I'm crossing my fingers, knock on wood, doesn't always hit us directly, at least not here in Miami. So I'll take that as a trade-off for 80-degree weather and up year-round.
Yes.
So
yeah, absolutely. And so did you escape the big storm recently?
Yeah, the big one that just came through, we didn't even get rain here in Miami. It went more up further north, so the middle part of the state, and it came from the west side. Miami's on the east side.
Yeah. Okay, right. It's a bit of a lottery this time of year, isn't it? So, Dre, you are an ex-professional athlete, an ex-professional basketball player, and now you coach people on high performance, whether it's in business or life. Before we get into the stuff that you talk to people about, talk me through just some of the highs and lows about being a professional athlete. Give us a little bit of an insight.
As far as being an athlete, it's mostly highs. I would say 97% highs, because what I tell people, even as an entrepreneur now, Paul, that being a professional athlete is the best job that you will ever have. And there's no job better than it. It's 10 times better than what I do now. I love what I do now. Being a professional athlete was better because you're literally playing a game for a living. And most people play games when they get off of work. We play games, we're at work. And we're getting paid to play the game. It's not even that we're just playing it. We're getting paid to play the game. And then you're getting to travel around, usually on the dime of the team. If you're on a team sport, they're paying for it. They're paying your food. They're paying your travel. They're paying the hotels. And they give you a salary for playing the sport. And all you have to do is, you got to be pretty damn good, but you just play a sport. So those are the highs of it. And then everyone knows you for playing that sport. They know you as that person who plays that sport. So you're usually pretty well known because of that. And I mean, I can't really think of any lows of it. The only lows there are things that you compare to when you're comparing it to, let's say, everyday life. There may be some lows like, hey, you got to show up to work every day, or you have to go to practice at times you don't want to go to practice, or you have to be one of the top 2% in the world so you can keep your job. I mean, if you want to call those lows, sure, but I couldn't really think of anything that I would consider a downside of being a pro athlete if you have the game to actually get in.
Yeah, and the mental game, what was the mental, did you feel a lot of pressure? Because I know a lot of athletes these days, or some athletes, feel a huge amount of pressure. Or did your just love for the game and what you were doing, did that just overcome that and it was more of a joy?
Well, anytime there was any pressure that I even started to think about, or let's say I'm on a team and I'm not getting as much playing time as I want, or I don't like the teammates, or I don't like the apartment they have me set up in, or the Wi-Fi is not working, I'd always remind myself, Paul, look what I'm doing. All right, look what I'm doing. I'm traveling the world playing a sport. Who am I going to complain to? Now, who am I going to tell about this? I can't tell people back home because none of them is living the kind of way that I'm living. So anytime I caught myself even thinking like that, even for a minute, I immediately canceled it out by saying, look where you're at. You're in, fill in the name of whatever country I was in, playing basketball for a living. Again, what do you have to complain about? If you get out of here, what are you going to do? All right, what were you doing before this? And so yes, some athletes do feel pressure these days because I think in the world that we're in now, I stopped playing in 2015 to give people a time frame here, but the world that we're in now, I think people are generally, as a society, just more mentally weak than they were in the era that people like myself and yourself come from. So they are looking at these things that we said, I actually like this kind of pressure. I like the kind of pressure that I had to play great in every practice and every game. Otherwise, I'll lose my job. Where they're looking at it like it's some type of burden. Again, I never allow myself to think that way.
I like the way that you brought in gratitude to counter that pressure. But let's now talk about what a lot of athletes do struggle with, and that is the transition, right? The transition from being in the top 2% of your field in the world, and all of that travel, all that awesome stuff that you talked about, and now all of a sudden you're just a regular guy. How did you find that transition, and what sort of struggles were there, and how did you overcome them?
Well, that transition was a little bit different for me, and it was easier for me because of the way that it was different. Because, Paul, I come from a Division III college, so here in the United States, Division III is the third tier of sports. That's not usually the level that produces pro players. So they're always looking at your pedigree, your whole career. They're looking at where you came from because that tells them, I guess it clues people into how much talent you might have, all right, no matter what you did in your previous stops. So I understood from the very first opportunity I got to play professionally that there might not be a second. And when I got the second, there may not be a third. So I always had that on my mind. So I started to build what became my business now while I was still playing, because there was a time when I didn't have a job. There was a time I was in between jobs. I was a unemployed professional athlete. And that's when I started focusing more on building what we now call personal brand on the internet, writing books, creating courses, making products. All eventually moved into coaching people and building this brand online to where I was making money just from the fact that I was publishing content and building an audience. So I had that stuff going for me the whole second half of my career. My career was almost a decade long. So that last 5 years, I had that stuff going. When I wasn't on the court, I was on the computer doing those things. And the good thing about being a pro athlete is that there's a lot of downtime. Yeah, a long day of work is like 4 hours. So you do whatever you want. So when you see athletes out there, specifically football and basketball players, making terrible rap music, is because we got a lot of time on our hands. I just happened to get on the internet and write books. They decided to get in the studio and make music.
And what was because that's really interesting, because you started then succession planning for your career.
Yeah,
right when you were in the middle of your career, right? Which is quite unusual, particularly I think back in those days. So you would have started your succession planning maybe 2010.
Exactly,
right?
That's correct.
We still had 5 years to go. Where did that come from? Was that just something in your mind that you were more aware than others that this could stop at any time? Or did you have a coach or somebody who kind of got in your head and had said, hey, Dre, you want to think about the long game here, not just the short game?
Actually, it's a combination of several things, what you just said there. You touched on a bunch of them. So number one, I never considered a succession plan. I was just like, how do I pay my bills if I don't get another phone call and another opportunity to play basketball? And I knew I wanted to combine basketball with the internet with making money, because I'm a little bit of a closet internet geek, Paul. A lot of people don't know that. So I was always into computers and stuff, but at the same time, I had this athletic ability. So I took the detour through sports before I came back to the computers. So what happened is, as I told you, I didn't know how long my career was going to last. Sometimes the job opportunities weren't coming. So if the phone wasn't ringing, I was asking myself, well, if this phone doesn't ring again, what am I going to do? How can I take what I'm already doing on the internet with basketball, because I had an audience on YouTube who were just watching me do drills and stuff. How can I take that audience and combine it with doing something that has to do with computers, because I knew I had a little bit of precociousness on computers. And is there a way to make money through the internet? And that was all starting to happen around about that 2009 through 2011 time period. Now, as far as me having anybody in my ear, not directly, but let me tell you where that did come from. The fact that I was even thinking this way was when I was in college, back around 2002, 2003, I got invited to a meeting where someone asked, well, the bulletin board posting said, do you want to make some extra money in the summertime? I responded to this because this is before college athletes could make money off of name, image, and likeness. So if you played a college sport, right, it was like you had two jobs. You had a full-time student workload and you had playing a sport. And you were not allowed to make money based off of the fact that you were an athlete. So I responded to that. Turns out this guy was doing network marketing, or what some people call multi-level marketing. And I did not build a career there, but I dabbled in it. And when I was in college, and it was there that I learned about two things. Number one, personal development, because the people in the meetings would say, if you're going to build a business, you have to build up yourself. Your business cannot grow any more than you grow. That made perfect sense to me. And number two is that these people were explaining entrepreneurship. And even though I have a 4-year degree in business, the things that were being taught at that network marketing meeting were never told to me in 4 years of sitting in college lecture halls. So that's what opened my mind to entrepreneurship. And then I went and started reading the books like Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Right. Eventually moved on and read Tim Ferriss. It was kind of like the digital version of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, if you really think about it. And those books started to inspire me to think, okay, I started thinking entrepreneurially. I knew I was going to play basketball, but after basketball, I don't want to go and do the regular work thing, because the adults that I saw around me growing up, they looked at work like a necessary evil. They worked 9-to-5 jobs for the most part. And they never talked about work like they were excited to go do it. Like, I'm excited to get on this and have this conversation with you. We're working right now. But when I would see my parents going to work as kids, they talked about work like I have to go to work, not I get to go to work. And looking at that, I figured, well, why do I want to go get a degree just so I can do this for the next 40 years? So when I saw the internet as an opportunity where you could kind of make money through self-expression, for lack of a better term, I said, this is what I want to do. So as soon as I saw any opportunity that you can monetize doing things on the internet, that's basically you putting your own personality and your own ideas and thoughts out there, I jumped on it. So my coach, I guess you could say, was the combination of network marketing, Robert Kiyosaki, and Tim Ferriss.
Yeah, nice. And so then you wrote a book called Work on Your Game, and I love the title, and I think most people would kind of get it straight away, the sporting analogy, but working on your own game. You're obviously all over the internet, you've got a big following. Talk me through the process of writing the book. All right. When did that first pop into your mind, and what came first? Was it the internet stuff about working on your game, or was it the book that drove the internet? Which one was first?
Internet was first. So I started blogging in 2005. Now, I never blew up from blogging, but I was blogging. And YouTube came out that same year, 2005. So I got on YouTube the same year it came out. And I was just putting out content to teach basketball players how to dribble, shoot, how to dunk, how to jump higher, etc. And it was around that 2009 time period where, again, as I told you, phone wasn't ringing. So I started looking for ways to make money. And the players had been asking me to make programs to help them individually. Then somebody gave me the idea, just in a YouTube comment, hey, Dre, why don't you just write down what you do and let other people follow your process? That's where I got my first product idea. And my products were selling for $4.99 US. All right, so $5 products. That's where I started. That was my first product on the internet, was $5. Now, as far as the books go, that came about a year later. I wrote my first book, was called Buy a Game. It's the only book of mine that's a narrative. It's actually right there above my ear. That was a picture of me right there. That's the only book where I'm just telling a story, like when I first started playing ball up through college. All the rest of my books are personal and professional development, such as Work on Your Game. And how I write those books, I mostly write my books on my phone. I type on the phone really fast. And
you're kidding?
No, I can type really good on the phone, really quick.
Wow.
Yeah. And now, Paul, we have the talk to text thing. So now you can just hit the microphone and you can say things and it'll write down what you say. Now, the key to that is you have to learn how to talk in a way that it reads properly. Because if you just talk normally, for example, we just took the transcript of this, it would not look like a book. You had to do a lot of editing.
I tell you what, particularly my section, because trying to understand my Irish accent from talk to text.
No, I think they're pretty good. I think they got it nowadays. They have the skills to understand it. You're talking English, they get it. But I know how to talk in a way that it reads like a paragraph.
Yes.
So I've learned how to do that by doing it over the years. So these days, there's a couple different ways that I do it. There is, of course, you still have to sit there and type stuff, which I don't always do as much. I usually will do that after. So my first draft, even if I'm writing an article, let's say I want to write a blog post, I will speak it out into Google Docs. Then I'll go back and edit it to make sure it reads properly. I do that same thing with my books. And also there's a process where, and I have some of my clients do this, where I'll just give them a bunch of questions. I give them like 20 questions about their whatever the subject is. And I tell them, just record your answer to the question in audio. Just record it on your phone or whatever. Send me the audio file. I'll get that transcribed, and then we clean it up to make that into what it needs to be for people who are not like natural writers. And these days, I mean, I don't know how much you pay attention to automation and tech stuff, but nowadays they're making it even easier. So writing a book is going to be like posting a tweet pretty soon. So I won't get a lot of them out there.
I reckon my next book, I might narrate my book and see how the talk to text does.
Oh yes, you should.
Let's talk about what the work on your game is all about. Give us the high level overview of that.
Sure. So work on your game, and I didn't even answer your question about the book, but I did that mostly through audio, recording it, and then just typing it out. So work on your game, the entire philosophy, the book also is all about taking the tools to help athletes reach the top of the sports world and translating those tools over to the business and professional world to help people perform at their highest level, do so consistently, and produce results. That's what we're all about here, is performance, consistency, and results.
Yeah. And I talk a lot to corporates about the science of peak performance in the world of professional sport. And I think that business can learn a shitload from professional sport, particularly about sustainable peak performance, right? About not just getting to the top of your game, but actually staying to the top of at the top of your game, all of the effort that needs to go into it. But also, I think the big difference I tend to find between professional sport and high-level business is the quality of recovery, right?
Yes.
If we think about that, right? Mm-hmm. Athletes recover professionally. Most business people, after a highly stressful week or a stressful day, will come home, drink alcohol, eat shit food, and destroy their sleep, right? Not most people, but quite a lot of business people. So that's one massive difference. But let's talk about how everyday people can use the stuff that you talk about in working on your game.
Sure. And what you just said there, I concur, as I have been coaching clients of mine, exact issue. They work really hard in the office and they come home and they're going in the pantry where they're not supposed to, drinking drinks that they don't want to drink, and not staying in the shape they want to stay in. So absolutely. And as far as how these things translate, well, we can just take the tools. So the first foundation of what we do here is mindset. And under mindset, we have 4 pillars: discipline, confidence, mental toughness, personal initiative. These are all things that an athlete needs if they're going to make it. And it's the same thing that a professional or entrepreneur needs if they're going to make it. We move from the mindset into the strategy, which is simply a plan of action. What exactly are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Third is the system. That's once we figure out doing these things produces the result that we want, how do we codify it and make a process out of it so we can do the same things the same way every time? And then the fourth piece is the accountability / implementation, which is how do we make sure that everything is working the way that it's supposed to? That includes both the process and the people. And we put those 4 pieces together, and that's our framework.
Very cool. I like it. Let's talk about the mindset stuff. I think I want to do a deep dive on that. So you said there was 4 things. There was discipline, confidence, mental toughness. What was the 4th one?
Personal initiative.
Personal initiative. I want to start with the big one. Let's start with the D word, right? Because I find that particularly when I work in a lot of health behavior change, and people talking about achieving their goals, and something that just does not come up enough is discipline. How important do you think that discipline is in terms of success in life in general, whether that be sport, business, or personal stuff?
Is the biggest thing. And that's the reason why you noticed it first. That is the differentiator between the people who max out or come close to maxing out on their potential and those who don't, is the discipline. Because everyone understands the concept of motivation. And if you tell someone, hey, here's a motivational message, hey, I might listen to it. I don't mind motivation when I can get it. But at the same time, there are times that you're not going to be motivated. You're not going to feel good. And the situation is you're not getting all the green lights. Like, things are not working in your favor, but there's still a job that needs to be done. Because the key to being a professional, I mean, the definition of professional is someone who does something as their main paid occupation, Paul. And if you're going to do something as your main paid occupation, that means you have to do it consistently because you're expecting the check to come in consistently. But at the same time, we don't feel motivated consistently. All right. Some days we are, some days we're not. So on the days when you're not motivated, what do you do? How do you show up? Do you show up at all? And we have a whole framework around that called the third day. And what makes the professional is that when they are not motivated, they still show up and deliver at such a level that you would not know that they were not motivated that day because their performance is consistent across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. I often talk, and particularly you can see how this translates into health, right? And people's health and their behaviors. And I find that there are a lot of people, and this is both in business and in personal life, who are waiting for the motivation fairy to come along and give them a big dollop of motivation. And they think, when I get the motivation, then I'm going to take action. And I always say to these people, you want the motivation fairy to come? Take action, because motivation follows action, not the other way around, right? I think there's a whole heap of neuroscience research out now that shows that when your brain knows that you're in forward motion towards your goal, that's when it releases dopamine, the chemical of goal-directed behavior and motivation. So I love the way that you have that interaction between motivation and discipline. But let's talk about the interplay between discipline and confidence.
Sure.
Right? Let's talk to our audience about that.
Most people, if I ask audiences of just everyday people, what internal trait do you want more of? Most people say confidence. They want to feel more self-esteem, healthier self-image. They just want to feel more bold and more just feel better about themselves, because most people rightly assume that if they feel more confident, they'll probably try more stuff, eventually achieve more stuff, and they can live more life and be more successful. So there's nothing wrong with wanting to be more confident. Confidence is a big thing, and people can feel confidence coming off you when you have it. And they can also feel when you don't have it. The issue is most people don't know how to go about acquiring confidence. They go about it incorrectly, doing things like faking it till you make it, which is not really a real thing. And I'm sure we can talk about that if you like, but where confidence actually comes from is discipline. Discipline creates confidence. And anytime you know someone who is highly confident at what they do, and it's real confidence, you'll usually, if you look behind it, you'll find that they are highly disciplined in the same thing that they're confident in. Because confidence is simply your belief in your ability to do a thing. And where does that come from? Belief comes from your past. We believe things because in the past, for some reason, we have seen that if we do this, we get this. So the discipline of doing the work last week leads to the confidence of doing the performance today. So the more disciplined you are willing to be, and the more discipline you're willing to enforce on yourself, if you will, then the more confident you're going to be at that thing. So it's like if you practice shooting the free throws in the empty gym, then when you get into the game, you're more confident that you can make the free throws because you know you've already done it. So that's where confidence comes from, is having the discipline. Challenge is most people don't want to be disciplined, or they don't enact the discipline, or they go about being disciplined the wrong way and trying to force feed it. So most of the time when people are talking to me about discipline, they'll say, well, I just need to get more motivated. I just need to wake up early. I just need to make myself go to the gym. I just need to record episodes of my podcast finally. I just need to finish writing this book. That's what most people say. Anytime someone starts a sentence with I just need to, usually means that they've been trying it for years and they haven't done it. And they just tell themselves, the same thing over and over again. And they end up not doing it. Where discipline comes from is structure. So when you have the right structure, that structure leads to the discipline, because if you just follow a structure or a process, then discipline comes out as a byproduct. It's like it falls out of the bottom of the funnel. Then when you're disciplined, that means the confidence to performance, and the performance to results.
Yeah, there's so much stuff that you said that we could just unpack. I think there's a couple of big ones I want to double click on. The one that you hinted about, process. And for me, process beats goals every day of the week, right? It's the process is how you actually get there. But the other one was about that fake it till you make it. And really what you were talking about there is confidence comes from trusting yourself, right? It's that if you don't have trust in yourself that you can do it, that there just is no confidence. It's all just the fake stuff. And talk us through that fake it till you make it, and why that just is just a meme that doesn't land in reality, right? There's so much that you said. I really want to dive into that whole idea of the interaction between the discipline to do stuff that then gives you the trust, that then gives you the real confidence, not the fake confidence. So talk us through the difference of those things.
Well, let's think of the story of Cinderella. So the story of Cinderella, she's in the rags and she's washing dishes at home, and then she gets the beautiful ball gown. But she gets a warning that when the clock strikes 12, this beautiful ball gown is going to turn to rags again. That's what fake it till you make it is like. So you can fake it and be Cinderella, but when the clock strikes 12, you have to go back to wearing the rags, go back to who you were. So people need to understand the subconscious mind takes things literally. So when you tell your subconscious that you are faking it, you're faking being something that you're not. The subconscious understands that at some point, this faking must end, and we have to go back to being who we truly are. That's the issue with faking it till you make it, is that it must come to an end. When instead, what you want to do is you want to step into a certain frame, step into a certain posture and become it rather than fake it. And becoming it simply means you're telling yourself that I am this person, not that I'm pretending to be this person. So you don't want to pretend to be something that you're not, because again, there's only so long that you can sustain that, because we all know the human being cannot behave in a way that is incongruent with the way that you truly see yourself for an extended period of time. So this is why faking it till you make it is not a real thing. An example that I use is a basketball player. He's in high school, and the coach says, today, I'm going to have each one of you pretend to be one of your teammates as an experiment, so you all can show each other what kind of player you are. So whatever mistakes you always make, your teammate who is supposed to be you, they're going to make those mistakes. And whatever you do well, your teammate's going to do that well, so you can show each other who you are, so you're not hearing it from me, the coach, all the time. And this random player, he gets assigned to be the best player on the team. And the best player on the team is his leading scorer. He has a D1 scholarship. And this day, this player who gets assigned to be the best player on the team, he goes out and has this amazing day in practice. He's doing moves that he never tries. He's making shots that he never even attempts. And his teammates are looking at him like, where'd all this come from? Because he never does this stuff. And what he had done is step into what I call the super you. That's our framework that we use for confidence. It's called the super you. And the thing is, he did not automatically just magically develop all these skills just because the coach told him to pretend to be the best player on the team. And because he wasn't really pretending. All he was doing was unlocking abilities that he already had within him. But what he needed was the permission, not only to bring out those abilities, but more importantly, and here's 80% of it, Paul, the permission to stop conforming to being the person you've always been. That's really what confidence is about, is giving yourself the permission to stop being the person that you think everybody else thinks, wants, and expects you to be. The reason many people do not change is, and you talked about this a little bit earlier when it comes to that momentum, right? It's the law of inertia, that an object in motion tends to remain in that same motion. So if we've been a certain type of person for the last 30 years, it's pretty hard to just change that in 30 seconds. It's not that it's impossible. It's just hard to do because we're so used to following our own habits. The good news is that with the snap of a finger, you can get out of that. You just have to get into the right mental state to get yourself to change when you want to change. It's kind of like Tony Robbins, when they has you walking across the fire, right? It's a mental state. You get into the state, you can walk across coals anytime you want, but you have to get in the right mental state to where your mind is not defeating you before you step on the fire.
And lots of this, again, comes back to trust, and trust in yourself comes from knowing that you have the skills and resources to be able to execute, right? So, but let's just dive into discipline a little bit. So I'm sure you have been asked this 1,000 times. And if either of us had the 100% feel-safe method, we'd be multimillionaires. But what can people do if people say to you, oh, I get disciplined, but I'm just not disciplined. How do I bring more discipline into my life?
Great question. Get some structure. And here's the easy thing about getting structure is that it already exists. You just have to plug yourself into it. So for example, if someone wants to lose weight, they want to get in shape. They've been going to the gym for months and they haven't really lost the weight they want to lose at the pace that they want to lose it at. If they keep going to the gym for the next 2 years, they will probably end up losing that last 50 pounds. The thing is, if they were to hire a personal trainer who actually knows what they're doing and will keep them on a regimen when they get to the gym, so they're actually working out during that hour instead of sitting on the machine looking at their phone, then that personal trainer will help this person lose 50 pounds in the next 6 months. Now, the investment to pay the personal trainer, whatever it costs, what you're buying is not the loss of 50 pounds. What you're buying is a year and a half of time. Because what it took you 2 years to do it by yourself is going to take you 6 months with a personal trainer. The trainer is going to represent structure because they're going to tell you what time to come to the gym, what time to leave, what to do while you're there, what you can and can't eat between now and the next workout. Now you have structure. That structure produces discipline. The discipline produces the confidence. The confidence produces the outcomes. So that's how it works. Another example of this, the flip side of this is, for example, when we were in elementary school and we saw that a substitute teacher walked into the classroom, we all looked around at each other, the students, and we knew that day the classroom is going to be a zoo. Why is this? All right. And so
I think every kid,
everyone knows
particularly
that, right?
20 years ago when we were at school, was like, here's the fresh meat, right?
Right. And Paul, why do we think this? We thought this because we know that the main teacher not being there means the structure is not in place today. And it's not because we were bad kids, but when you take structure away, you get chaos. That's a law. That's a scientific law. It's the law of entropy. If you remove the guardrails and the standards, you get chaos. That's what happens. It happens in societies. It happens in people. It happens in any organization. You remove the guardrails, you get chaos. So the kids are acting crazy that day. And the very next day, the main teacher comes back to school that they're not sick anymore. And those same kids who were acting wild yesterday are now sitting at the desk with their hands folded. What changed? Nothing. The same person. It's just now they have structure again. So now they go back to behaving.
I love that you brought the law of entropy into that, and you remove structure, you get chaos. And actually, it's worthwhile people reflecting on that, particularly around health behavior change, right? Is that structure and sticking to the structure is pretty key. So we talked about discipline, we talked about confidence. Let's now talk about mental toughness. Right?
Sure.
That is that's a word or a phrase that is very close to my heart. So give us your take on mental toughness and why it's actually important in both business, sport, and in your personal life.
The way I define mental toughness is your ability to remain disciplined, which means showing up consistently and doing your job, and remain confident, putting yourself and your work out there boldly and authentically, despite the fact that doing all the quote unquote right things has not yet produced the desired or intended result. That's what mental toughness is all about. And this matters because no matter how good you are, how talented, and how well intentioned, nothing in life is ever going to go exactly as planned. And things usually end up going awry for all of us at different points, some more often than others, or it may appear more often than others, but none of us has complete control over everything. 99% of life is outside of our control. You only control 1% of life, and that's just what you do. And for the most part, it's just what you think, the way you think about things. So mental toughness, the way I like to describe it, Paul, is mental toughness is like the security system for your mental health. They are not diametrically opposed. They actually work together. When you are mentally tough, and other words people use for this are grit, perseverance, stick-to-itiveness, persistence, and resilience. You can use them interchangeably in this context. Mental toughness is just about your ability to frame circumstances that are out of your control in such a way that it is constructive for you rather than destructive. And when people fail to do that, they allow themselves to become victim of circumstance. The problem is you don't control circumstance. So anything you allow yourself to become a victim of, it starts to control you. And the most successful people out there, they mentally have control over how they see things, even though they do not always control how things go.
No, look, I love what you said. And that plays in really nicely. I'm not sure you're aware, but there is a large body of academic research around the concept of mental toughness. And I actually had the mental toughness guys who created this on my podcast. And it's linked to the older concept of hardiness, right? So they talk about 4 components to mental toughness: a control orientation, which you talked about, that focusing on the stuff that you can control, right? A challenge orientation, where you lean into challenge and discomfort, right? A commitment orientation, right? Which then plays into your process and structure, and a confidence orientation.
That's right.
And so you can see how those 4 things really do interact with each other. And I love the way you brought in the mental health, because in their view, the opposite of mental toughness is not mental weakness, it's mental sensitivity, which is really interesting, right? Because it's when people are just mentally sensitive, that then can dissuade them from leaning into the discomfort, from doing the hard stuff, right? And they become easily affected by others. Their confidence is affected by other people, and it's not an internal sense of confidence. So I really like the way you put that together and draw the linkage to mental health. When people say to you, I'd love to have more mental toughness, right? What sort of a steer do you give them around that?
Well, number one, to be mentally tough, you have to be in tough situations. So you can't become mentally tough if
Love
everything's
it.
easy.
Love it.
Right?
And this is the whole
Yes.
thing, right? Sorry, to the interaction between that and resilience. And there's so many people talk about resilience, about self-care and self-compassion. And I'm like, I bang my head off the wall and I go, that's necessary, but it's not sufficient to be resilient or mentally tough. You have to go through hard stuff, right? You have to have the experience.
Exactly.
Sorry, I interrupted you,
Right.
but it's just, I really wanted to emphasize
No, it's
that.
fine. It's your show. So the good thing about getting into tough situations is that we can do so voluntarily. So everyone's familiar with the concept of stress, but there are different types of stress. There's distress, which is the kind of stress that beats you down, makes you feel old, tired, and 10 years older than you actually are. Then you have eustress. And eustress, I'm sure you're familiar with it. Yes.
You're singing my song, buddy.
EUSTRESS. Yeah. Now, a lot of people don't know about eustress, but eustress is a real thing, and it's voluntary stress. It's a stress that you put yourself under on purpose because you believe is going to make you better, stronger, tougher for the future. So, for example, if you sign up to run a marathon and you never even ran around the block, that's eustress. You do it. You know it's going to be tough, but you do it on purpose because it's going to make you better. Or when you go to the gym and lift heavy weights, that's eustress. If you play a sport, you know the coach is going to make you do stuff that you're uncomfortable with, but you sign up for it. A personal trainer, a business coach, you know they're going to push you outside of your comfort zone. That's eustress. That's the kind of stress we voluntarily sign ourselves up for because we understand that going through this hard thing is going to make us better. So anyone who wants to be more mentally tough, you need to sign yourself up for some eustress activities that will push you outside of what you're used to doing. Now, technically, we can push ourselves, but the human being has a self-protection mechanism within us that does not allow us to inflict a certain amount of damage on ourselves. We'll stop ourselves. Whereas your trainer cannot feel that your lungs are burning, so they'll make you do that extra set when you would allow yourself to not do that extra set. So eustress is often best administered through someone outside of ourselves because they can push us in ways that we would never push ourselves.
And other people in the team, right? You will have noticed that.
That's
I
right.
noticed that particularly in my military stuff or training with a partner, training with a group. When you're training with a group, you generally will go further. You'll lean into that. But what I wanted to just explore a little bit deeper on this, you've opened a can of worms here on this eustress, because I think there's a very strong interplay with motivation. So there's a lady, I can't remember her name, a professor, who's written a great book called Dopamine Nation and talks about the different ways that we can get dopamine, right? And we can get dopamine from eating lots of shit food, taking alcohol, taking drugs, all of those sorts of things release dopamine. But what her research shows is that when you do stuff that's easy like that and you're indulging, you get a dopamine hit. But over time, what happens after that dopamine hit is you get a crash. You get a dopamine crash really quite quickly, right? And that's why people reach for more. But what she showed, and you're going to love this, is that when you do hard stuff, like such as exercise and cold exposure, we know that they both release dopamine, but you do not get the dopamine crash afterwards. You continue to feel good and to feel motivated. And she thinks it's the difference between having to work for stuff versus having it easy. That traditionally as humans, we've had to work hard for food. We've had to work hard for shelter, for those sorts of things. And the act of having to work to get the dopamine has a different impact than if we just are handed it or get it easy, right? It's really quite cool stuff. And it's that real importance of eustress and particularly seeking out hard stuff. How important was that early in your career before you became a professional athlete? Like, did you have that drive in you before you became an athlete? Because it's really interesting, right? When people go, athletes, are they born or are they made?
Well, I think some are born because they just happen to be immensely talented, and you do have to hit a certain genetic lottery if you want to make it at the pro level of any sport. At the same time, there are athletes, I consider myself part of this other group, who I had enough ability, natural ability, to where I was eligible. I was above the line of eligibility, but might be 1,000 guys above that line, but only 100 jobs. Right. So the reason I was able to make it is because I had the grit, the mental toughness, the stick-to-itiveness to kind of fight through that group of people to get one of those jobs that not all of us was going to get. So for me, going back in the story, I didn't start playing basketball until I was 14. I played other sports, but didn't start playing until I was 14. I only played 1 year high school ball, so no one was expecting me to even make the high school team. Then when I made the high school team, no one thought I was going to play in college. I played Division III college. So even though I was playing, who cares? I mean, you're playing Division III college. This doesn't produce pro players. It's not like you're getting drafted to the Lakers from playing at a Division III college. So even then, getting out of college, no one was expecting me to go pro. So all of these times, I had to run off my own energy. I had to run off of my own belief and my own ignorance and my belief that I could possibly make it as a pro athlete, because it's not like there was anyone or a whole neighborhood of people or a singular person aside from myself saying there's a chance that Dre could become a professional athlete, and for good reason. No rational, logical person would have looked at my background and said, this guy is going to the next level from the playground to high school to college to the pros. No one was saying he's going to go to the next level, whatever level I was playing at. So the only reason I made any of those is because of I took it upon my own volition to try and go and make it to the next level. And one thing that I'll say in addition to that, Paul, is there are people who I know personally, even family members of mine, people from my neighborhoods, players that I've just played with in schools and seen, who had just as much, if not more, ability as far as physical tools and genetics to play basketball, whether to play high school, college, or the pro level, but they had no internal drive. They didn't have the drive to actually do the stuff. And I would see them and say, all right, this person has more tools than I have, but they clearly don't want to do it. And what I tell people is that you're going to find someone who becomes highly successful. You need a combination of can do and want to. You need both. Because if someone has the can do without the want to, they become an underachiever. You have the want to without the can do, you are mediocre. And when you have both, you get magic.
And you just beautifully framed up the last part of your mindset, which is around that personal initiative thing. So just quickly talk us through the whole idea of, you talked earlier on about the mindset, the strategy, the system. We've touched on those things. Let's talk a little bit about the accountability and the implementation. So just give people a little bit of a guide around that, because I think accountability is really important in all this stuff.
Yeah, going right along what we talked about when it comes to mental toughness and being pushed, that eustress usually comes from someone or something holding you accountable at a level that may be above what you're used to. And that's how we make ourselves better. So when people talk about 1% better every day, well, if we're left to our own devices, we usually don't get 1% better every day. So we need something that's going to push us. Okay, can you do a little bit better than you did last time? So you did 11 pull-ups last time. Can you do 12? Now can you do 15? Now can you do 20? And we usually can, as long as we are cognizant of it and conscious of it. We can do a lot more when we're conscious and intentional about pushing ourselves. But again, the human brain tends to default to what we're used to doing. So that accountability and implementation is about having something or someone around us to keep holding us to a standard that we want to get to, whether that means moving ourselves forward, continuing to do what we're supposed to do. For some people, that's the accomplishment. Just showing up consistently is a thing. For other people, showing up, they got that part down. It's about how do I get better when I show up? So it depends on who the person is and what they want to do. But the whole point for people like yourself and myself, Paul, as coaches, is one of the main things that people come to us for, especially the high performers, is they want accountability. It's not that they don't know what to do. It's not that they don't know how to do it. They want someone who will hold them accountable, is not going to bullshit them, is not going to tell them that it's okay when they didn't do what they told me they were going to do the last time we talked. They want someone who's going to hold them accountable. Like, hey, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. Let's get ourselves in gear and get back on horse and do what we're supposed to do. I find high level performers usually are not looking for someone to tell them what to do. They're looking for someone to just keep a foot in their back, so to speak, to keep doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, look, I like to talk about accountability partners, which is what you're really talking about there, because they kind of help you when the motivation or the discipline is waning a little bit. That accountability really does help you to step up.
That's right.
So, mate, what would you say overall? Like, this stuff's been great. What is the most valuable thing that people get from, reading your books, attending your courses, your seminars, those sorts of things? What if I'm to try to pin you down to one thing? What would you say that it is?
Paul, my superpower is my ability to take things that some people may see as complex, and I can break them down and make them simple and digestible for anybody, even if they have never considered the concept.
Yeah, I like that, and I can see just through this interview how that you have actually codified that and created a nice structure and all the things that people need to be successful. And I love the fact that that your system straddles both personal life, business, and sport. Where can people go to? So this has been awesome. Where can people go to find out more about you, your courses, your books? Because you got a whole shit heap of content. So where do we send people?
Well, you can go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. So that's where we do all of our coaching, our masterminds, our courses, et cetera. It's just all at workonyourgameuniversity.com. You can schedule a time to get on to have a conversation with us. We talk about where you're at, where you want to go. And if we can possibly help you, we'll tell you how it looks.
Cool. Awesome. We're all right to help. And socials, what about socials? Where's the best place from a socials perspective? Or do we just want people to go to the university?
Well, you go to the university site, but if you like social media, I'm on all of them. What are you using most these days, Paul? Social media?
I got to say, I'm not particularly good at social media. Probably Instagram and LinkedIn would be the ones that I would use, but I would be more LinkedIn. But I know lots of people love YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. Are you on all of them, are you?
I'm on everything. And what's interesting, what I found, Paul, that you might want to look into this, TikTok has been great for us. I've been doing TikTok.
I've been hearing that more and more, right?
Personal professional development for, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but TikTok has been outpacing all the other apps in terms of growth for me over the last month. TikTok's been killing it.
I had this exact same conversation yesterday with a podcaster. He was interviewing me on a podcast, and he said to me, "Mate, you need to get on TikTok."
Yeah, I think you need to get on TikTok, Paul. That's twice now. You need to get on TikTok.
That's twice. Yeah. But I'm have to told it a third time, then there's something wrong with me, right?
Yeah.
Dre, this has been awesome. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I think people will get lots out of that just following that process. But so people, if you want to really enhance your chances of success, workonyourgameuniversity.com. Dre Baldwin, thanks very much.
Paul, thank you for having me on. I appreciate you sharing your platform.